combat is chaotic in the best way. In 2026, it's basically a ghost. If you want to play it legally, you're stuck in the aftermarket. We're talking old discs, reseller listings, complete in-box flex posts, sealed copies sitting like they're investment assets. Prices that used to be normal used game money have drifted into collector territory, and they keep climbing because supply is capped and the game still has heat. Yes, the game is still banging today. People stream it, people quote it, community tournaments still run it. New fans find it through clips and the best licensed fighting game lists. And then reality slaps them. There's nowhere to buy it. So the price keeps climbing and the only people cashing out are resellers. And why bringing back Fight for New York turns into an economic and legal nightmare. Because the game isn't just one product, it's a stack of other people's property stitched together, artist likeness, voice, music rights, brand approvals, estate, managers, lawyers, a long chain of gatekeepers who can slow it down, jack up the costs, or just shut it down completely. That's the hostage situation. Fight for New York is the hostage. Before we open the case file, we need to clean up the story because most of it is just wishful thinking dressed up as facts. First, the EA lost the code story. I mean, even if the code was sitting on a hard drive tomorrow, it wouldn't solve the real problem. The hard part is clearance. What you're allowed to ship in 2026 and who has the power to actually say yes. Second, they're just called the rapper's idea. I mean, yes, that's fan logic, but in reality, you're dealing with contracts, approvals, likeness, voice, managers, music, labels, and everyone's lawyers. And because the game is so legendary, every person involved knows that there's money in nostalgia, which changes the tone of every conversation. Third, they already got paid assumption. People who were involved have spoken out about how the early 2000s deals weren't huge payouts. That matters because a re-release today becomes a fresh negotiation and nobody is treating their names like a cheap asset anymore. So no, this didn't vanish because people stopped caring. It vanished because the machine behind it is expensive, messy, and high risk. You have to remember what the early 2000s felt like. Oh, those were some good times. Hip hop wasn't just popular, it was running culture. It was the blueprint. At Def Jam, Kevin Lyles was the label's president at the time. Culture guy, business guy, and a gamer. In early 2000s, he goes to EA to pitch a real game, built around hip hop as the main event. EA didn't fully see it at first. They saw musicians. Now, Lyles saw action heroes with built-in fan bases, so he gave them the simplest reality check possible. Go ask your kids. That line right there is what pushed it over the line because it showed the power dynamic. Def Jam wasn't just chasing EA. EA wanted the cultural heat and Def Jam had it. And the smartest move they made was keeping the fighting foundation solid. Nobody wanted some licensed game that just felt like a cardboard cutout of famous faces taped on top. They grabbed a proven DNA, then poured Def Jam culture all over it. That Aki Engine already understood impact. Hits felt heavy, contact feels real. You get that car crash collision instead of characters sliding around like they're on ice. Just look at WCW Thunder or WWF Warzone. And that's why it worked. The system had respect and the presentation had swagger. Def Jam came in with the opposite advantage. The foundation was already good. The label stayed in the room to keep it authentic, the rules stayed readable, and the customization loop gave people a reason to keep climbing. That mix right there is rare. And once something rare prints money, the next question always shows up. How do we make it bigger? Def Jam Fight for NY in 2004 is where they stopped playing safe. They keep the DNA, Aki's heavy, readable combat, and they rip away the ring. Then they drag the fight into the city and build a whole thing around one rule. If it's in front of you, it matters. Now, most stages aren't rings. They're nightclubs, alleys, subways, construction sites, grimy, dark areas. The crowd is right on top of you, and the environment isn't decoration, it's part of the fight. The cleanest example of that is the subway stage. Narrow platform, claustrophobic. If you throw your opponent onto the tracks at the wrong moment and they get hit by an oncoming train, instant KO. That's the whole philosophy right there. Fights end when you get outpositioned and the crowd isn't just background anymore, they are active. Throw someone into the bystanders and they shove them back, or crack them with whatever is in their hands, bottles, 2x4s, turning the audience into a violent pinball bumper. Fight for NY also had depth. When you go backwards to Vendetta, it treated everyone like a wrestler. But Fight for NY turns the roster into an ecosystem with 5 styles. As a Street Fighter, you had heavy brawls, haymakers, and grime. The kickboxers were blessed with kicks, quick strikes, and rhythm. Martial artists had agility, acrobatics, and cleaner strings. Submission artists, they had clinches and joint locks, forced tap outs. Wrestling, they had the pickups, slams, and control. And here's the twist, you don't have to pick one and live with it. You can combine up to 3 styles into hybrids. So your created fighter can be street fighting plus submission plus wrestling. Brawl to open them up, drag them into a lock, and then end it with a slam into a hazard. Or kickboxing plus martial arts, which had speed, range, and flashy KOs. See, that's how Fight for NY creates thousands of characters without needing 1,000 faces. It lets you build identities. As Josh Holmes explained it, each class has a unique mechanic and signature ways to earn KOs. Style choice isn't cosmetics. A submission specialist plays different win conditions than a kickboxer, and they made it readable. Punch is punch, kick is kick, grapple is grapple. Instant understanding. Then there's the create a fighter fantasy. It was pure cinema. Here's what made it addictive even as a solo player. It didn't just let you pick Snoop and swing, it let you become the main character. The game opens with police asking you to identify yourself, and you build your face through a police sketch artist interface. Face shape, skin tone, hair, the works. Not just a menu, a ritual. You're not just picking a character, you're entering the city. Then you grow. You earn money from fights and you spend it on your image, because in this world, style is also power. And it uses real brands. This one was amazing. No fake gold chains. We're talking Jacob the Jeweler, Fat Farm, Rockaware, Air Jordans, barbershops, tattoo parlors. You evolve the look as you evolve the fighter. That's why Fight for NY survived while most licensed games died. It didn't just sell a roster, it sold a loop. Fight, earn, upgrade, look sharper, fight tougher, learn styles, become a problem. Fight for NY plays like a climb through a dirty ecosystem with a bit more of a beefier story. It had around 40 plus fights with branching paths. The game picks up after Vendetta. Demob gets arrested and you help free him. You get pulled into a bigger territory conflict, especially with new rival boss, Crow, played by Snoop Dogg. Choices affect progression and endings. Josh Holmes put it bluntly, 3 times the length, 6 times the story content. There's even a girlfriend system with real personalities. Def Jam Fight for NY launches September the 20th, 2004 on PlayStation 2, Xbox and GameCube. It immediately hits critical success, 8.7 out of 10 from IGN and GameSpot. Commercially, it sold over 1 million units across platforms, and it was nominated for the best fighting game at the 2004 Spike Video Game Awards. 3 things collide. Combat that feels good in your hands, a world interactive enough to generate chaos naturally, a progression fantasy anchored in customization. That's why it's still spoken about like the king. And that's why what comes next hurts. Because once you hit a peak like that, executives start sniffing for bigger. And bigger is usually where franchises go to die. After Fight for NY, the franchise had a clean identity, a real cultural artifact, the crown jewel. Then EA grabbed the wheel and decided that the problem wasn't execution, it was genre. Development moved to EA Chicago instead of the Aki/EA Canada setup. Leadership hardened around one belief: Fight for NY didn't scale to the next gen, and wrestling DNA didn't fit hip hop. Kudo Tsunoda, EA Chicago's GM and executive producer, became the face of the pivot. So Icon isn't Fight for NY 2, it's a complete rebrand wearing sequel clothing. The gimmick: environments reacting to the beat like a third fighter. Mechanically, they committed. Now, right stick becomes a turntable, you scratch music to trigger stage reactions, objects sync to bass, drop creates hazard, hit, explode, burn depending on the stage. I mean, in trailers, it looked pretty good. The gas stations explode into the beat, buildings pulsing, but in your hands, it felt heavy and disconnected. Even producers admitted later that building with base idea didn't translate cleanly into the core fighting, sluggish feel, and the cost of that gimmick was the foundation itself. No grappling, no wrestling, Aki's depth was replaced by hazard timing. Even the feedback language changes. No traditional health bar, just a HUD that gets bloodier as you take damage. As the famous saying goes, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, but clearly EA weren't listening to that. Def Jam Icon also shifts the era. Fight for NY felt like a coherent underworld. Crow, Magic, Ice-T, Scarface, Ludacris, Method Man, Redman. Icon's roster reads like a refreshed playlist. Young Jeezy, The Game, Lil Jon, Big Boy, Bun B, E40, Paul Wall, Mike Jones, Jim Jones. Classic fans would feel it immediately. The new roster, yes, full of quality artists, it just felt different. The continuity died at the character select screen. Fight for NY felt like crews, bosses, a universe, whereas Icon just felt like a playlist with cameos. Icon launches March 2007, next gen only, with bigger expectations, bigger costs, but the reception is divisive. Sales would underperform hard compared to Fight for NY's multi-platform success, with Icon commonly estimated to be in the few hundred thousands range. Then the real damage. EA closes EA Chicago on November the 6th, 2007. That's the spinal cord finally snapping. When the studio dies, the institutional memory dies with it. Even Icon 2 existed in prototype form and dies with the shutdown of the studio. Icon didn't kill Def Jam by existing, it killed Def Jam by burning the bridge between what fans wanted and what the publishers wanted to sell next. Icon didn't just disappoint people, it changed the temperature of the franchise. After Fight for New York proved the concept could sell big, the series doesn't come back with a real console sequel. It spins off into handheld. Def Jam Fight for New York, their takeover on PlayStation Portable, which is a prequel, Demob's Rise. Def Jam mutates into other projects, and one of them becomes a warning sign for why nobody wants this brand without a hazmat suit. Def Jam Rapstar in 2010 isn't a fighter, but it's collateral damage. A Def Jam branded game tangled in music licensing at scale. It sells modestly. Then the game shows up later, a lawsuit demanding $8 million tied to rights and clearance. The developer eventually collapses and folds. Corporate risk teams remembers that forever. You come to realize that when making a game like Def Jam, you have to survive the paperwork now and later on. If Demob and Crow were the final bosses of the first two games, let's talk about the real final boss of this franchise, the licensing hell. People talk about a Def Jam comeback like it's a simple play. Pick a roster, pick a soundtrack, remaster it, cash out. In reality, you're rebuilding a legal machine. Start with the roster. You're dealing with real humans as brands. People change labels, management changes, rights get cold. Some artists pass away, and you're negotiating with estates. Just take a DMX for example. Then there's the money. A 2004 deal is ancient history in 2026. A re-release in 2026 is a complete new negotiation, and people want modern terms. Then music turns it into a nightmare. Masters and publishings, clearances, samples buried inside samples. I mean, one missing signature can freeze the whole thing. And when a publisher looks at that, they don't just see easy remaster money, they see legal risks, delay, and slow fire that they'll be babysitting for years. Nothing since has contradicted that. The most credible public comments in the last couple years still points back to the same wall, renegotiating music and likeness in the modern era. When we look at Def Jam Fight for NY, the game didn't end. It became a zombie. Phase 1, the long hunger, which was the 2000s. People coped, rebought old copies, emulated, watched highlight reels like it was the lost sport. Whereas the new fans, they kept showing up. Then you look at Phase 2, the tease, August 2020. Def Jam hints at something big, tied to a follower milestone, everybody leans in, but then nothing happens. Phase 3, demand becomes measurable, May 2021. Ed Boon runs a poll, which fighting franchise needs a comeback? Def Jam leads 47% with over 130,000 votes. Phase 4. The quiet part gets said out loud in 2024. People involved start talking openly. Ice-T basically spells it out. If you bring it back, you're paying voice and music rights again. Back then, nobody wanted to be left out. Today, nobody is taking the old money deals. Phase 5. Proof that the game still has a pulse, June 2025. Fight for NY is still showing up at huge fighting game tournaments. The game may be old, but it still has a very passionate, die-hard fan base. Phase 6, the rumor season, 2025. Every year, the game gets rarer, the rumor market gets louder. I mean, in 2025, you start seeing posts and blog chatters pushing titles like Fight for Glory, remastered soon, next gen revival, the usual stuff. Problem is, none of it comes with the one thing that matters, a real announcement from the people who own the rights. So it does the usual thing. It turns into the same cycle, fans get a hit out of hope, resellers get more leverage, and the game stays locked in the same glass box. But the demand creates a vacuum. So you get rumors, AI covers, insiders, fake announcements, not news, just coping. If Def Jam ever comes back, it won't be because the internet begged hard enough. It happens only if someone chooses a path that doesn't require rebuilding 2004 atom by atom. Moving forward, there are two doors. Door 1, a new Def Jam fighting game built for modern contracts. Same fantasy, hip-hop as a mythic underworld, but with roster and soundtrack built from day one for licensing reality. You don't build a 60-character museum, you build something you can clear and sustain. Fewer artists at launch, more originals carrying story weights, expansions done through clean, modern contracts. If Icon taught the lesson, replace the fighting foundation and you lose the respect, a modern Def Jam revival has to anchor itself in readable systems, distinct archetypes, and meaningful style identity. Hip-hop is the setting, but the fighting has to be the foundation. Door number 2, a spiritual successor that dodges the hostage situation. If Def Jam can't be cleared, build the feeling without the chains. We're talking stylized street baller mechanics, environmental chaos, crew rivalries, progression, but the roster is fictional. The music is commissioned. The IP is renewable. We're talking no lawsuits hanging over every pixel. Now, the fans will complain at first because we're all nostalgia addicts. But if the game hits, they will convert because people don't worship the logo, they worship the feeling. And here's the uncomfortable truth. A true remaster is the worst of both worlds. You still have to clear the old roster and soundtrack while your ceiling is capped because it's just a remaster. That's why Fight for NY still feels like a ghost, because what fans want isn't just a game. It's an era, a roster, a soundtrack, a vibe, locked behind contracts that were never designed to live this long. They didn't bury this game in sand. they buried it in contracts. Until then, Def Jam Fight for New York stays what it is, a classic you can't buy, a legend locked behind glass.
You're nothing but a punk, your daddy's a punk, and your mama's a bitch.